Hi guys, it's me, Ruowen Huang. Before I begin, let me first introduce myself. My name is Ruowen Huang. I'm an author, spirit coach, and also a psychic. This is a youth seminar that I'm going to break into 3 parts that I share with you publicly. In the next couple weeks, I will slowly air each section to you, hoping to get you understanding more about youth confusion and how we can communicate with one another. But before I begin, I want to make a disclaimer. Whatever I'm going to share with you is simply based on my personal experience for the 20 plus years of consultation. I'm not here to change your belief or, change your mind or your way of living. I'm simply trying to offer help based on my own personal perspective. So you may or may not find it helpful, but don't take it personally. If it applies to you, great. But if it doesn't apply to you, you can simply leave it with me. So, without further ado, let's get into the topic. In this seminar, I'm going to break into 3 parts of it. One is the cause of uncertainty, like why are we experiencing what we are experiencing right now? I'm hoping to cover how parents are behaving and why children are feeling uncertainty about their life and feel like they seem to have way more problem than we used to have before. Then next section or next part of the sharing, I'm going to share about where the future is heading with all the advanced technology that we're dealing with right now. And seems like, it's hard to move a little bit forward or don't know where to begin or start, etc. And the last part of the seminar, I'm going to talk about what can we do about it. Since, many of you might feel lost and do not know where to begin, how to start, or where we're going from this point forward. I'm hoping to give you some advice that will actually give you a little bit kickstart from a psychic point of view. So anyway, in this very particular episode, and I would like to share about what caused all this uncertainty. But before I actually get into it, I want to talk about the short periods of evolutions of where we were and where we are right now. So we all know history. History, if we ever pushing back to thousands of years ago, it used to be a society or without civilization. Like people tend to live in chaos or, not knowing what to do, no rule to follow. And based on that start, it then evolved into implementing rules and law, etc. So it doesn't matter, it's Western world, Chinese world, it start having more and more rule. As people start to have rule to follow, they start to feel safer, calmer instead of feeling chaotic all the time. But as rule develops, it start getting more and more restricted of how to live life or the way of living. So then you start getting into there's a standard of living, and then that's slowly pushing us into industrial era, where there's very often a standard to follow or expectation to be met, and trying not to create mistake, which when we believe is so far ago, but it's actually not. The industrial era kind of give us a sense of security, but also give us a feeling of suffocating or cannot fully develop ourselves. Then eventually we got pushed to the explosive era in a way that people simply try to break the rule or try to only show the good part of it, but then hide the bad part of it, just so they can kind of meet that standard of the industrial era, or if not, reach beyond or get better at it. So what happened is, I believe many of you must notice, like there's a period of time, all you see is beautiful place, beautiful food, and successful people, but it seems like you never got to know their best side of it. Then, of course, that era will then push people to become the era of awareness. That's when people start becoming more aware. As I say, from a soul's perspective, if you push anything to an extreme, you will eventually bring them into where balance point is. But due to that everything seems so glamorous and everything seems so beautiful and wonderful, then you start pushing people to become more aware of what they are doing or what things are. So this is not an era that people give you something new or something that you do not know. It's simply people become more aware of things that's already there but never being talked about, such as energy. You will hear people talk about energy. Energy is nothing new, but all of a sudden people become more aware of saving energy, or that's good energy or bad energy. Or you can see people become more aware of the environment, aware of like social interaction, or aware of things. So aware of not wasting food, not wasting energy, etc. So this is the era that we are actually in right now, and also a lot of you, I would say somewhere between 15 to 25 are living in right now. It's all of a sudden you become more aware, and you probably would notice like any kids that are born this time or during this time, they also become more aware. They are not only aware of the environment, they also aware of the humanity, or they're aware of environmental behavior, etc. So this is the period that we are living in right now. And then as it progresses, it's going to become the era of awakening, where people not only aware, but start to wake up and understand what they can do about it. And then eventually push us into the further era called era of manifestation, where people can actually start creating things, not only by their thought, by their action, but also by aware of how to use the energy or vibration around them to manifest whatever it is that they wanted. But as I say, each era usually you will last at least 12 years of time, because it will make a full circle of it. Sometimes longer. It really depending on how the soul evolve, etc. So if many of you, that just give you a quick rundown of the basically how history has been and then where we are right now. So now from a psychic's point of view, you will always understand soul have a nature of growing or improving or evolution. Like soul have a nature to evolve itself. The reason I say that is any soul will always have a habit of try to grow itself or develop itself or multiply itself in certain areas so they can reach their fullest or get the most experience that they're seeking for. The reason I'm saying that is if you ever push back to the era that I just shared with you earlier, you will see how we go from like chaotic during the period time, like chaotic, that we're seeking for rule or seeking for some kind of management or security. So that's exactly what pushed us into the era of like, you know, rule implementing, etc. And then while we have the rule, we always try to improve ourselves better. That's why we start having a standard, believing if we lay out a standard, that would be easier for people to follow. And then that's exactly why we get into the era of industrial era. So if you understand that, you also understand when things that become too much, then people start trying to break through or break free. And then that's exactly why we got into that seems information overload, everything feels too much, so explosive and etc. Like totally different from the industrial era period of time to then people become more aware. So if you really understand from a psychic point of view, that you understand soul have a nature to develop itself and evolve itself, that also apply to, I'm going to give you an example. Like if you planted a seed and then you simply put it in the dirt and then just leave it alone, with the nature play its course, the seed will most likely develop into plant or flower or tree, etc. So same thing as if you have an embryo inside mother's womb, even without intention to nurture it, it will still multiply itself and develop itself into a baby. So that is tell you to know soul itself have the nature to do that. Like there are things that do not have any soul in that you can continue living it there for a long time, and you will not change, I would say 10 years, 20 years, or even 1,000 years of time. So that is a quicker way to really differentiate things with soul or things without soul. So let's come back to what we were talking about. If you truly understand soul have a nature to seek for development, or because you have a nature to evolve itself, then you will understand it doesn't matter whatever period of time that we have gone through, good or bad, it is in a way pushing soul to evolve, right? As we all know, sometimes we will evolve through difficult situation rather than a happy situation. So that may also explain why through the history, there are good time, there are bad time, but in overall, if you evaluate it, like if you evaluate our history, you will see the development or evolution of the soul. So if you understand all that, then now let's talk about the nowadays generation. But before we get into that, let's talk about the people who were raised on the industrial era, which is probably your parent or including me, my era, or not to mention my mother's era. In that particular era, because there were so many rules to follow, and then there are so many standards to meet, the reason I keep calling it industrial era is simply because it's like cars manufacturing in the factory, that you have to meet certain standard to be called good, certain standard to be called beautiful, certain standard to be called successful. So people have to find certain husband or wife, so then they look good, or a certain job to be called successful job or good job, etc. So understand my parent, well, my era, that's definitely what my parents tried to lay upon me, and not to mention my parents definitely raised that way. So why, if we ever look at the history, it seems like a good idea, it somehow, somewhere does not apply in our generation. And which is also why a lot of youth seems to have difficulty communicate with their parent and simply cannot understand their parent. Why can their parent understand? So before we get into that, I just simply want to introduce how does this industrial era impact your parents' way of thinking. So just imagine you're growing up in the environment like there's always certain standards, such as your report card will look good if you got A all the way. So you will have your parents constantly expecting you to have a A+ report card, or they want you to be very active, or they want you to be very sociable, etc. So as you growing up, you constantly have different level of standard to meet. So that is be qualified good. Very often you get punished if you are not meeting good standard. Either it can be, cold treatment, or it can be spanking, or it can be anything. So due to all kind of punishment that is given to us by not meeting the standard, most of the people in our era grow up afraid to make mistake. So due to that mindset, that will also create a bunch of people who will continue teaching their kids not to make mistake, because in their head that often lead to punishment. Even at home, if I don't punish you, you may be punished by the society, or you may be punished by your teacher or supervisor or government or etc. So due to that mindset, very likely you see a set of parents who always have a standard. Sometimes the standard can be loosened, but then remember, they were born and raised that way, so they tend to give a standard. That standard might waver based on how they try to grow together with the generation, but that is still the foundation of how we got brought up. And then you will have a parent who tend to expect things to happen, because that's also the way we got brought up. So even we all know expectation is not good for any relationship, but remember, that's the way we got brought up. Sometimes it's just simply hard to break that habit. Then you deal with a group of people that who growing up in the industrial era, afraid of making mistake. So to a lot of young generation, they will perceive older generation seems to get fear all the time. They're always scared, they're afraid, or they simply would not make change. Do understand is because that's just the way they got brought up and the way they are raised. So even though they are exposed to the technology or information like a lot this day, but all habit is hard to change, right? So that's exactly why you will see some parents, since they've been living for so long, it's a little bit harder time for them to make change. So this, I hope, give you just a little bit idea why parents are behaving certain way, like a lot of youth simply cannot understand or find difficulty to communicate with them. So now let's bring back to youth, the possible problem that youth will have. So remember what I mentioned earlier, after the industrial era, and then since there's always standard, and then there is always expectation to be met, and then there's always afraid to make mistake. In between, you are dealing with an era like people only want to show good side of them. I want to show the best part of me. I don't want people to find the bad part of me. I don't want anybody to see the ugly side of me. So that is when the social media first start rising. So when it start rising, you guys must all know Facebook or Instagram or even TikTok or even Snapchat, you will see all those people eager to show the good part of them, whether it's true or not true. But then I want to show the good part of you, because remember, they are raised by a group of parents who growing up in the industrial era, who always got a lot of standard. And if not for their parent, they have a society or majority of society expecting them to be a certain way, to be called good or successful or beautiful, etc. So now those people, they constantly want to show good side. If they go travel, they want to make sure they take the beautiful picture of that location, or they eat something, they want to make sure they take beautiful picture of the food. If they take a picture of themselves, they want to make sure it's all edited and it look all beautiful. It had a lot to do with the influence of how they were raised. People cannot do things that they do not know, right? So at this point, bear with me and follow with me. You're dealing with this group of people who's constantly show you how rich they are, how successful they are, what kind of people they hang out with, how beautiful they are, and where they go. Or they don't show the picture that they are depressed. They don't show the picture of they looking ugly like the first thing in the morning, etc. But all you see is the beautiful picture out there. That start to make you now, the era of awareness, start to thinking, well, how can people become so beautiful, so successful? Everything is so good out there. Remember, you guys are also got a little bit influenced by the era of industrial era, because your parents probably try to be easy on you, but yet have a habit that's hard to break, and then try to give you standard, but try to be a little bit easy with their standard. But after all, they still have a standard. They still have an expectation. They still have a rule to follow, as that's how you got brought up. But while you were growing up, you also experienced this era of, explosive era, or like where everybody showed all good of them. And then it seems like success so easy for them, and everything comes so easy for them. And that is conflicting with the industrial era of thinking, where this era, everything seems so easy. My parents tell me to work hard, really hard, then I would be successful. But those people seem to just take a couple pictures and then they are successful. My parents tell me to do, study computer science or be a doctor or be something so I can make a lot of money. But you are dealing with this group of people that not a doctor and then not studying really hard, and all they do, some of them didn't even have a college degree or any degree, but then they make way more money than anybody can imagine of. So remember, different from any other era, youth, many of you are exposed to two possibilities that is polar opposite. Now you have a parents who might tell you to follow the rule, then you will eventually lead to success. And yet you are exposing to a society that did everything against what your parents say and yet reach the success. So that's also why many of you start to feel very confused. Which one is right? Because if whatever my parent told me is right, those group of people would not be as successful as they are. But they are. They are not only successful, they are way beyond successful that my parent can comprehend or understand, etc. And also, not to mention, in your old time, your parents were only exposed to a community that's only within arm reach, while you, on the other hand, due to social media, you were exposed to a community that's beyond your arm reach. Sometimes it's very globally, sometimes it can be across the world, like you did not even know, or no way you can possibly knew at the industrial era. So due to that, you create more and more confusion. You no longer know what it is true and what it is right and what you can do about it. So that's also reason why your parent would often very confused. And why will you be so confused? Probably without a calculation that what it is that you guys dealing through, because to them, that's normal way of living. That's normal way of living. Everything you just follow the rule, then you will find your security, nest. But yet, I don't understand why you're so confused, not experiencing what it is that you guys were experiencing too. So you may also hear your parents suggesting, as long as you don't expose yourself to the social media, you don't look around the world, what other people is doing, you don't check on other people, then you will be just fine. Now understand where that comment come from. That come from how we were raised. Because the industrial era, everything is within arm reach. We deal with people, we make friends by seeing them, not by online. That we try to understand, but we don't fully understand, right? So we think the only way to solve your problem is simply take the problem away. Why would we suggest that? Because that's how we got recommended when we were young, or as our upbringing. So it's not that they do not understand. Well, it is because they do not understand, but that doesn't mean like they would not try to understand. But what ended up happening with this era is with you guys' era of awareness, you are dealing with industrial era education. You are exposed to the era of explosion or perfection or whatever it is, that everything was so perfect. Now you are so confused. As confused as you are, you do not know how to communicate. So many of you choose to shut down and not communicate because you simply do not understand how to make your parent understand, or how to experiencing this can be a possibility, and yet you just simply don't know how to reach it. And very often, since you believe your parents never reach that success, and they are not able to give you the good advice that help you to reach something similar to that. So in result of that, many of you or many youth would choose not to communicate at all, and then you would keep everything to yourself. So now, based on all the story that I'm sharing with you, let's talk about what possible problem that you guys will most likely deal with. You guys would be dealing with you guys will possibly be dealing with the insecurity. You often feeling that you are not good enough. And the reason of that mindset thinking have a lot to do with how you got raised. There's a standard. Even though you don't fully grow in this era, you are taught there are always a standard to be met as well. So due to that, the way of growing up, you will constantly feel you're not good enough. Then the next thing is you will often compare everything you do, everything you think to what you are exposed to, which is this era of exposure. Everything is overloaded. You know, you got overloaded information and no one teach you how to decipher what's good or bad information, but you are constantly fed information. And remember, they are not kind of neutral information. They are simply overloaded information because everything is too good to be true. Everything is perfect. Everything is beautiful. Everything is things like that. So based on that image, and then you have the standard to meet background, you constantly compare yourself to them. And due to that comparison, you start to feel like I will never reach that standard. And the reason of that is because before, while you were kid, when your parents were growing up, they only have their parents to compete with. That is, if their parents making $2,000 and then they believe they are successful, and then all I have to do is make $2,500, then I am more successful than my parents. But nowadays, you guys are no longer competing with your parents. You're competing with this worldwide social media that you simply don't know where the standard is. So instead of $2,000, that's your end goal that you have to achieve. Now you are dealing with all those people showing they're making $1 million a day even, or they driving luxury car, they're living in fancy house, you know, way beyond you can imagine. And then you no longer know what is successful. Like, what is success? What is successful? So instead of competing with a parent, now you're competing with a standard you do not know how to reach. So the gap becomes so big and beyond comprehensive, then you start to come back and wondering, does it make sense for whatever things I do? So the social media comparison is also a big part that contribute to your insecurity because you simply don't know where the standard anymore. So it also create a higher standard for you to meet. Now, while you are living your life already, if not confused as hell, you constantly have your parent disapproval. You're living in between those two eras that you were trying to figure out a way. So by figuring out a way to be able to satisfy both need in you, very often that would push you to try something new. But because you're trying something new that's out of the way that your parent got raised to, you very often get disapproval by your parents. Your parent might expect you to have settled with a marriage, good wife, good husband, and yet you want to try something different because you are exposed to other possibility. Your information come from anywhere in the world. And then now you are thinking, well, but I want to try something new. I want to do something that's different. So very often it seems like it doesn't matter whatever you do, you are having a conflict with your parents or their disapproval, which will not encourage you, but discourage you to communicate with them any further. And then due to the habit, that will lead you to a habit of lack of communication. Right? So you become quieter. People are more comfortable texting rather than communicating because they feel it starts with, if I text, I can read it, I can rephrase it, but once I say it, I might have made mistake that I cannot correct it anymore. So that eventually got people become more comfortable texting than talking. But then butterfly effect, it will get you guys to start lack of community, because even though you're raised by your parents, you also experience this period of time that everything is only good. So when you are alone by yourself, you're constantly judging yourself, what is not good enough, and then what can you show to others. By afraid of showing the worst side of you, you are afraid to expose yourself to the community to be found out you are not good enough, or you will never be good enough. So also in your generation, you probably also heard a lot of people are socially awkward, or they simply don't know how to talk to people or how to make friends. And sometimes they don't even have that social skill, know-how. So due to that behavior, now butterfly affected too, you got lack of community, and you lack of support group, and you lack of friends. So when you are in your low, when you are down, you have an idea, it's better that I hide. So I will close the door, hide it, cry myself silly, and yet I have no friends to go to. So as you can see now, it kind of one infect the other. So use different from the old time, which seems to make friends with arm reach and everything is within here. And we got people to compare, but it's not in such a great scale. Many of you would tend to just lock yourself in your own room and then do not reach out. So due to lack of social skill, and then don't have community, afraid your parent disapproval, and have higher standard reach, you start to get depressed, and which is also why most of the parents do not understand why these kids got depressed so easily this day. It seems like they're so fragile and things like that. And then, which will also push you to not making effort to make things. That's very much have to do with your fear of failure. Just because you are raised by parents who try to tell you what's standard to me. And now, by afraid of facing their disapproval, you're afraid to make mistake, you're afraid to fail in front of them. So what do? If I don't make any effort, if I don't even start it, I will not fail. So that's also why a lot of parents will see a lot of kids, the easy way for them to do that. You will hear a lot of parents talking about that kids to this day, they don't even show up at work. Or they simply just don't show up. And then I cannot understand what kind of mindset they're going through. Well, they have a lot to do with everything I say above that contribute to their behavior. A lot of time, I just don't have to start, then I would never have a chance to fail. Then we're talking about kids nowadays start focusing on social media way more than reality. And then again, it's also a butterfly effect. They don't know how to make friends with people. They don't know how to create the community. They don't have friends. They don't have social media. They don't have everything like that. So the easiest way for them to do is simply seek the solution in social media, because it seems so much easier. It's much easier to make friends up there where they can be whoever they are and don't worry about meeting anybody's standard, and then meeting people in reality and go through all that work and deal with it. So that's also why kids subconsciously will start seeking for all the answer in social media rather than the reality of it. So due to everything I said above, you must be able to see that will also contribute to you guys' lack of skill and experience, because everything that is happening out there continue pushing you into your own dark hole and don't come out. Just you rather hide behind the screen than standing in front of the screen. You rather be nobody in real life, but be somebody on the social media or on the internet. So everything I say simply contribute to all the insecurity that youth have, simply because they are exposed. They are raised by the era of industrial era, and then they experience this era of explosive, that's everything overloaded, to now they are confused as hell. They have fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of everything. So the best way for them to do is hide behind this camouflage that nobody knows exactly who they are, and then they can simply do that and not to deal with what their reality is. So as many of you must realize, or I'm hoping by explaining this, it will help a lot of parents understand why are kids getting depressed so much easier and why are they confused as hell. Like, it's not because they want to, it's because they feel or they believe no one know how to guide them out of this. Because if they talking to their parents and or even get a sense like their parent is try to lay standard on top of them, they feel need to oppose it, or they feel the need to fight that. That is simply because they are in the era of awareness. The things that they start craving for freedom, they start to asking who am I, what am I doing here? And they start to have that sense of awareness rising within them when they believe their parents are not able to answer their question. Therefore, they will choose to keep to themselves. So anyway, I hope to give you an idea where all those confusion come from. Growing up by believing there's a standard to be met. Then I can be good, successful. But then as I growing up, I'm exposed to an era like those people simply make no effort, but yet successful, and way more successful than my parents used to be. They seem to do nothing, and then yet they are pretty or whatever it is. They got everything everybody would dream of. So while they're growing up, their mindset or behavior continuously fighting with one another that left them with believing no one really know how to create the life they wanted, since whoever my parents were, they tell me to be successful, but they don't seem happy, right? So I start questioning if their advice will work for me, or I start to question if I'm able to communicate with them, or especially if every time I try to bring up something, right away they're telling me how to do something, when in my head I already know that may not work. Why? Because they have also experienced this period of time that they couldn't quite fully explain what, how, or how to get there, or what it is. Like, people seem to be able to get a successful and good life without any effort. So now come to the era of awareness, which many of you will feel confused because, and Meanwhile, no social group, no community, and don't know who to talk to, and that would eventually lead to depression that your parents do not understand. Well, from a psychic point of view, you understand what I mentioned earlier. So have a tendency to evolve itself. You will know any suppression or any behavior that stop its growing will lead to death, such as if the seed, you stop giving it sun, stop giving it water, stop giving it nutrition, it will eventually die. The same thing goes to soul. The reason of depressions is often come from some form of suppression. That is, if you suppress your emotion to flow, you suppress your mind to think, you suppress yourself to express something in your reality, you most likely will start feeling depression. That's simply because some form of suppression was laid upon you. That's why you will have this depressed feeling inside you. So anyway, this is the first part of our youth seminar. Life is not all bad. I'm just simply trying to give you guys a little bit idea of both parties. Like you will start to understand why majority of youth seems to get depressed easily, and then why they feel they are so confused and lost a lot of time, and yet they refuse to get your suggestion of how to make life better, and why many of you youth, please do understand why your parents always talk certain way and make you believe like they simply don't understand or will never understand. That's have a lot to do with their way of growing up. That's how they were taught. People cannot really teach you something they don't know how, unless there's a way or by communicate with you and things like that. That's how they eventually know. So this hopefully take care of the first part of my youth seminar and hope to make sense to you all, understand why you are so confused right now. And with the next section, I hope to take care of where our future is going, like what's going to happen after the era of awareness. Now you are aware, but what are you going to do with your awareness? Now you're more aware of equality, you are more aware of humanity, you are aware they are living a life is way better than working your light off. Like your parent used to work their life to a company, but then got laid off, got something. Like, where is our future going with that? And I'm hoping with the next part of the seminar, I'm able to answer all your questions. Again, if you like what I'm doing, follow, share, and like, and stay tuned with my youth seminar. And I will see you next time. Bye now.